All right, everybody, we should be live here. And I am Dapper Dino, as you probably know if you're watching this on my channel, but you might also be watching it on Finding Truth's channel. And so I am someone who Ahmed has asked to sometimes host discussions for him or moderate debates. And so we're doing something similar to that. This is going to be a bit of a discussion. So for those of you who don't know, Finding Truth here is linked in the description of my video. And he is an apologist for Islam, and he is here to take the affirmative on the question, does studying life lead to belief in God? Then we have Jackson Wheat, who is studying organismal biology. Am I correct on that one? His channel is also linked. And then we have Steve McRae, who is here, and he is an armchair philosopher, I believe he described himself as earlier today. Yeah. But he has two channels that I've linked down below. Jackson is going, and Steve are both broadly taking the no position, Jackson from an explicitly atheist position and Steve from an agnostic position. And the format right now is we're going to go to a roughly 10-minute opening by Ahmed, and then we're just going to open it up to the panel. And then at about the hour mark, we're going to open up for Q&A. So if you have questions, if you super chat them, we'll definitely get to them. But if you aren't willing to super chat or you can't, please try to wait until the end of that period. Otherwise, they'll just get lost in chat. So once we do that, we'll have about a half an hour worth of Q&A time. And then the stream will shut down. I'm going to go make myself some dinner. But then I will also be back later on my channel for an after show that will be starting at a time somewhat to be determined, but not long after this channel, or this video ends. And that is also linked in the description. It's almost like I remembered to link things in the description. How about that? So I think unless anyone has any stuff that they feel like I missed, I think we can just dive right into Ahmed's opening statement.
Thank you, Dapper. So I'm putting on my presentation now. All right, so here we go. All right, do we see it?
Yes.
All right. So just a little bit about my background. So I'm an electronics and communications engineer. I did also my master's courses in computer and control, though I didn't do my thesis, but I did my master's in business. I studied Islam for 4 years. I have 30 years working experience in information systems, implementation and design, and 20 years as an executive in various transnational companies. I speak 4 languages with different proficiency, and I've traveled to 28 countries. Obviously, my worldview is Islam, and I have Finding Truth channel, which you can also check out. And what I'm going to go through with you is that every one of us has to take this decision at a point of his life. Either you accept God, and God's name in Islam is Allah, or you reject and you become an atheist, or you're not sure. So my point is, when I had to take this point, of course I was raised Muslim, but even people who are raised in a certain religion, they take this decision one point in their life or the other, that they either continue or they would just change their position. So I thought it should be obvious, if God is there, it should be obvious one way or the other. And one of the ways it struck me is that how obvious he is when you look at life, not only as a scientist, but even as a normal lay person who looks at life. And there is a verse, an ayah in the Quran that says, it was in a conversation between Pharaoh and Moses, where Moses says, who's your God? Pharaoh says, who's your God? And Moses replies, which means he said, our Lord is the one who has given each thing its creation and then guided. And this matter of guidance really is very interesting. So for example, in engineering, since I'm an engineer, when we build something, we set a design. And then we depend on somebody, for example, if it's a car, somebody who's going to ride the car and drive the car, that he will follow the instructions that the manufacturer has given for driving the car. But let's say we're building an autonomous car. Then the autonomous car should have this knowledge. So we program this third or fourth layer of knowledge into the car. We give it information about the map. We give it information about traffic law. We give it information about how it should behave. So after we create the car, we give it this guidance. It is a second level. So I'm not going to discuss really exactly the materialistic side of the creation, which we may differ on whether it's evolutionary science or creation. I'm going to look at that level and see if this guidance exists in living things or not, and then take Jackson's opinion and Steve. I intend to make this a very amicable discussion, but this is the model. So we have a purpose for a thing. We give it, based on the purpose, we think of functionality, we put on design, we have parts list, we have assembly instructions, we manufacture it. But then this thing, like a car, it needs to follow a law, maintenance instruction, and then there is disposal and recycling instructions. So if this is living things, the left is what we want to do. The right is how I see this mapping. And the law and the maintenance instructions and the way living things behave are this guidance that I'm looking for. In the case of human beings, it's called religion, and we have free will, so we can accept it or reject it. So let me give you those like 1-minute slides about how I see this level that, in my opinion, can only be explained by the presence of Allah, by the presence of God. And this is everyday observations. We all see birds, and birds do this amazing thing called a migration. And if you want to migrate, then you understand the map. Birds start migration at a certain time before it's too late. They start from an origin and they go to a destination. So there is like this, there is information there. They take specific paths and they reach, and maybe they lay eggs, and maybe even the parents die. And then maybe the birds will go back. They know where they're coming from. Where is this coming from? How does a bird understand how to use the sun as a compass, or the stars, or odors, or how does it understand things like magnetic maps? How does it understand things like locations, like GPS? It's very interesting. When you look at fish, so we have this thing we call a fish, and it's a living thing. But we have something like salmon fish, and salmon fish is maybe living in the Pacific Ocean. But at a certain point of time, as if they know the map, they would go ashore, they would go into rivers, they will swim opposite to the direction of the current, they would jump over waterfalls until they are eaten by bears. They reach there completely exhausted, the ones that survive, of course, the eating and the exhaustion and the hunting. Then they lay eggs. Almost they die after laying the eggs, but the new fish would swim the other way and go to the ocean. They've never met their parents, and in the right time they will go back. How is this happening? This is a level of guidance. There is an instruction manual here. And DNA and the materialistic understanding of biology, my question to Jackson will be, can it explain this kind of knowledge? We look at crocodiles. We know that there is something called symbiosis, and symbiosis is there are unlimited number of, I'm just giving a few examples here, but this crocodile would open its mouth, a bird will come, it will not eat the bird, it will not eat this specific bird, and the bird will eat remnants in its teeth. But you have a picture down there for a crocodile eating another bird. Number one, how does this specific bird know that the crocodile is not going to eat it? And how does the crocodile know the intent of this bird, even if it has not seen it? You hatch a crocodile, you hatch a bird, they just know. Almost every creature knows who's its friend and who's its foe. You see the sharks and those little fish running around, eating its crumbs, the crumbs of the fish that would come after it preys. Why does the shark not eat this? Because they also do it a service, and the examples are just endless. We have puppies, babies of mammals. How do they understand that they need to go and suckle? And even the human beings, which is amazing that they do not have such level of knowledge and guidance that the animals have. But if a baby is born, it knows it needs to go to its mother and suckle. It knows that there is something that's called breastfeeding. It was feeding from its umbilical cord, but it knows it needs to go to the mother and suckle. We have an ayah in the Quran, it says, وَهَدَيْنَاهُ النَّجْدَيْنِ, and we have shown him the two paths. Many exegetes would say it means the path of right and wrong, but I was struck that some of them say that the two paths here are the guidance that God has given to each baby, that there are two paths where he can suckle milk. With the ayah or without, how does this knowledge come to a baby? We have animals like lions and tigers and cats. Look at this lion. Look how it's hiding. Look at the gazelle coming, and it's waiting for the right moment and it attacks. And when you look at packs of lions or tigers or wolves, and the amazing strategies they put together to hunt, and how do they know this strategy? They didn't go to school. And it's amazing because if you see a cat sneaking at a bird, and a bird knowing that the cat will eat it, but if it's a buffalo, it will not run away. It's really amazing. Did you see a beaver before? How on earth is there civil engineers called beavers? How do they understand that building a dam will help them in their life? And how on earth do they even build these tunnels in the dams, and a piece of it is underwater and a piece is over water? And how crazy is it that maybe we have learned about dams from beavers? It's just unbelievable.
About a minute.
Civil engineering or any kind of engineering needs knowledge. Crabs that exchange shells, how do they know? How do they line up and exchange shells? And there's a new shell and everyone gives its shell to the other one. How is this knowledge there? Bees build these magnificently engineered structures. You see it, it's a design, and every bee everywhere that builds this kind of structure builds the structure. We've studied it. We know that it has ingenuity in it. How do they know it? When a bee finds a farm or a garden where there is pollen, and it does this sign language to the other bees, and we learned it, and it's like an encoded location determination language, and they understand the location and they go.
Right,
how does it understand? Sorry?
We are at 10 minutes. So if you have any conclusion that you want to get to real quick.
So my examples are done. But from engineering, when there is data, when there is information, when there is knowledge, somebody is transmitting. And this is the basic information theory. When you have a receiving, there is a transmission. So my question is, and I'm going to hand to Dapper and Jackson here. When you take a position that Allah is there or God is there, and you accept there are religions, you accept revelation, you accept that this is guidance from Him. To me, the existence of this kind of guidance in animal life, which I don't think is explained by biology, is clear evidence that guidance from somebody that we call God exists, and that human beings who are created with free will are not an exception. And since we have free will, it's just not downloaded into our minds. We receive a book that we can accept and reject. This is my argument in short, and I would now gladly see if Jackson and Steve can give me insights from their own point of view about that.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Ahmed. And I just want to say that I expect this conversation to go reasonably politely and cordially, but I do have some rules. We're going to try to minimize any over talking. I recognize that there's a delay, so sometimes there's not much you can do about it. It seems like someone finished talking, but they didn't. I get it. But on the other hand, I also want to make sure that if direct questions are asked, we get direct answers. So if someone asks you a direct question, please make sure you give a direct answer and don't spend a whole lot of time with preamble. All right, so Jackson or Steve, whichever one of you wants to go ahead first, just give your thoughts on that presentation.
Let Jackson take the science and I'll address the philosophy.
Have you ever heard of like the field of sociobiology or ethology or any field that studies animal behavior? Ahmed?
Yeah, I heard about studying animal behavior. Now, my question to you,
Okay,
if you'd
so
like to summarize, is where is this knowledge coming from? Not if we understand how why they're behaving this way, if it's beneficial to them. Where is the knowledge and where is the engineering and the strategies coming from? This is the question.
That's where it comes from. If you've heard of like the Baldwin effect, things like that, like how performing, if you can have a behavior, but if there is a genetic way to get this behavior into this population, like those who perform a certain behavior, are more likely to survive on average than those who don't perform a certain behavior. That's where it comes from, right? I mean, the birds and ungulate mammals that migrate, they follow patterns of vegetation. They follow, you mentioned temperature. These are climatic things that tell them it's not great to live in this environment anymore because my food is disappearing. It's too cold now. Whatever I eat is not blooming anymore. I'm going to keep following the food that's blooming, and that's leading me south or north or east or west. And if you don't follow the food, you die. You have no food. That's all that is.
Jackson, I think it's time to let Ahmed respond to that. You've given a few examples. So.
Okay, sure.
So again, let's look at the example of the salmon or the bird that migrates, and many now think that birds, especially in long hauls, are following magnetic fields of the Earth, and some have.
Can you give me a citation?
Well, this is the discussion. So I can give you a citation. I've gone through something, but irrespective of that, now it goes to the south of Spain or to from South Africa to North Africa using whatever. The question is, something travels 15,000 kilometers to a specific place, relentlessly flying. It knows where to go. It is a hatched baby chick, and it grows into a bird, and it does go this distance. How does the salmon understand that it needs to leave the Pacific Ocean, goes to the shore of North America, goes against the current? Nothing there is like it's following anything specific that I know about. A beaver building a dam. I cannot imagine.
First.
Yeah,
We can't go to
the birds first. Let's talk about the birds first.
Let's pick one of them. We can't go to every single example and then try to have them all explained in order.
So you asked about the birds. It took me 5 seconds to find a study that talks about the mystery behind how birds navigate might finally be solved. It's not the iron in their beaks providing a magnetic compass, but a protein in their eyes that lets them see Earth's magnetic fields. These findings come courtesy of two papers, one studying robins, the other zebra finches. The fancy eye protein is called CRY4, and it's part of a class of proteins called cryptochromes, photoreceptors sensitive to blue light found in both plants and animals. These proteins play a role in regulating circadian rhythms. There's also been evidence in recent years that in birds, the cryptochromes in their eyes are responsible for their abilities to orient themselves by detecting magnetic fields, a sense called magnetoreception. We know that birds can only sense magnetic fields if certain wavelengths of light are available. Specifically, studies have shown that avian magnetoreception seems dependent on blue light. So this confirms that the mechanism is a visual one based on cryptochromes, which may be able to detect because of the fields because of quantum coherence. So they are also following a set of environmental cues.
Good. So they navigate one way or the other. I've mentioned 5, including magnetic fields. This is not the question. The question is, how do they know that they should migrate in the first place? Why do they go to the same places? How come they know their way back? And how come they take a specific route? Now, if they know the route,
just answered that.
This or that. No, you say,
okay. Why do they follow this? That's why.
Yeah. So you have a map, and you know that these are the streets. But the map does not have the names of the cities, but you know which city you're going to. So number 1, you understand what the map is. And number 2, you know where you're going, regardless that there are no names written there. So the question is,
let's follow that analogy. That's okay. So let's follow that analogy. So this analogy of I'm sorry, I may have broken up a bit there. Let's follow that analogy, right? So what you're asking is, there are no names. We don't know the names of the streets or the names of the cities or anything like that. We got a city over here and a city over here, and we're walking down from one to another. Well, how do we get there? And what I'm saying is, what these studies are saying is, we're using visual cues. Okay, but why are we following those visual cues? Is I think the question you're asking.
Why migrate in the very first thing?
Okay, so the ones who don't follow the visual cues, who don't follow where the food is going, or don't follow these because these cues are correlated with something. If it's just I can see light, but it has no relation to my surroundings, it doesn't matter. Why would I follow it? But if I can see this light and there's a relation to my surroundings, then I have an incentive to follow it. And anyone who doesn't follow that incentive, which is that there's food there or mates, you die. You don't pass your genes on. Natural selection selects you out. That's all that is. And so all
let's say, when you're done, just tell me. I'm fine.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. So let's imagine this. Okay. So we start by this population of 10,000 birds living in South Africa or in North Europe. And some of them migrate, and some of them don't. And 900 die, and 100 for some reason reach the south of Spain. And they lay eggs there and die. And for some reason, the offspring will go back to North Europe, or they don't. Why do they go back, and how is this knowledge now transferred
for one thing,
to the second? And
well,
then
for one thing, birds aren't normally aren't normally seminiparous, so they don't normally lay eggs and then die. Birds are normally iteroparous.
All right. So whether they lay eggs and die or they don't, let's take some new birds from that ones who went into Spain and hatch them there and see if they go back or they have repeat the migration pattern or not. So the question is, each new bird that hatches, each new salmon that hatches, because in the case of the salmon, they die at river starting at the end of the mother salmon, it dies, and the new salmon will start from there, and then it goes back to the Pacific, and then the next season it will go back to the river. Now, as a biologist, my question to you is: do we have, just for this one, we can go to the other examples later, but is there evidence that genetic material that is transferred from one generation to the other would encode routes in rivers and migration routes for birds? And do we have things like that? Because those guys are not going to school and learning about maps and how.
I just gave you an explanation as to why the birds are going in certain ways. It's because they're following light in addition to these. They can sense the magnetic fields, and the magnetic fields run in certain directions. I'm correct in saying the magnetic fields run in like certain directions, right? Or am I just totally off?
Yeah. How do you know? How do they know which direction and why?
But I just read that to you. It's because of the proteins, this fancy eye protein, CLY4, which helps regulate the circadian rhythm, and so they are using that to detect.
The protein is showing you that you have a magnetic field around you. So where do you know where you're supposed to go? So you're supposed to follow the magnetic field strength in this or that direction, because
also
having a way to know the map is different from knowing where you should go and why.
No, we just explained this
for the salmon. So you have a clue there from materialistic point
the
of view.
salmon, yes. I just looked at it. I spent 5 seconds doing research on it, and I found the answer for the salmon. Yes, but what I'm saying about yes, you're asking your two questions there, right? The first question is, why do they go a certain way? And the second question what is the reason they pick this way? And then why do they go that way, right? And so the reason or how do they pick that way? And then why do they go that way, I guess would be a better way to say it. And so what I'm saying is,
you have to let him finish the answer.
Okay, right. Okay, so those are your questions. And as I'm saying, and I just looked it up for salmon, it's also chemical cues so that they can spawn. They follow chemical cues, right? But the birds are following this sense because they have this protein which helps them do their magnetoreception. The salmon, the short answer is to spawn. Salmon are born in fresh water, usually in cool, fast-flowing water. I can't talk. After growing considerably in size, they return to the same rivers where they were born using chemical cues and battle their way upstream to spawning areas. The idea being that if the area were good enough, it will be good enough for their offspring. And so, again, they're following chemical cues. It's magnetoreception in the case of birds, and it's chemical cues, whatever it is. That one didn't say specifically. I would have to look because I'm not an expert on salmon. But the point is, it's always chemical cues. That's what it seems to be. We have to go there because if we don't spawn or we don't eat, right? It's too cold. We die of cold. These are the reasons organisms migrate, and this is
you're a fish.
This is not surprising to anyone.
So you're a fish in the middle of the Pacific, and you're in the middle of salt water all over you, but you go to the shore, and then you find the entry of a river where definitely the composition of the water is different. Why did you go there in the first place? And how do you have the knowledge how do you have the knowledge that your eggs would be better off in fresh water rather than salt water? Does that or not grab your attention from the point of view of where they get the knowledge? Now they have the knowledge
really?
that for reaching the river, they need to follow whatever salt water gradient or whatever. How do they know they need to go to the river? And when they go to the river and find the current in the other way, why are they killing themselves to reach to the other side? It's not how do they swim the other side or what, or how do they detect fresh water? Why do they go to fresh water and why do they kill themselves to reach there? And then how does the next generation know it needs to go to the other way and repeat the same? How is the knowledge transferred? Is there, again, the question is there evidence from evolutionary biology or from biology or from genetics that this information is encoded in the DNA? And you didn't answer me on that one. I'm not an expert on genetics, but it really seems like you didn't really bother to do any research on this.
Can I give it a shot?
I mean,
go ahead, Steve.
Sure,
but that's for Tapper to decide.
Well, yeah, it's a.
I didn't want to put a paper in our side chat here.
It's a combination of DNA and also epigenetic features as well. But let me ask some questions here because I think foundationally there's some issues here. This is I know you know this, and I'm not trying to be salacious on it, but I mean you are familiar with the watchmaker fallacy. You are familiar with the argument from design. These are sophistic type argumentations, and I don't mean that to be some kind of detrimental to your argument just by saying by fiat this is sophistry, but it is a form of sophistry. The teleological argument goes back many years, goes back thousands of years. Even in the Islamic community, it goes back about to the 10th century. And the teleological argument was a sophistic approach to try to say we see certain things that we know to be naturalistic. We know there's naturalism that exists in some capacity where we can look at something and say this was designed by a human. We look on the ground, we see an arrowhead, we know that the arrowhead has been designed by humans because we've seen humans design them. As you know, Ahmed, around the end of the 19th century, a guy named Darwin came along, and his greatest accomplishment was to try to show people that even though these things apparently have a teleological argument to be had for, there's also teleonomics that exist, which is the appearance of design. And what he showed was we don't need, as you would say, a designer to design these things. Nature could be that designer. And so when you have an architect, when you have a designer, when they do something, they do it so other people can make something, right? If I want Jackson to build something and I design something, I do a blueprint and I can give it to anybody that has the skills to understand the nomenclature of that blueprint to build that thing. There's no need for God to do that. God would be the one building it. So he wouldn't have to design anything. He doesn't need to give it to anybody to design anything. He said, this is how it is. This is how I want it to be. If we were to find a blueprint of life, and I mean, like an instruction manual from start to finish of everything about biology to say, this is if we want to build a human, this is how we go about doing it, and the instructions to go about how to do it, that might lead some credibility to the argument from design. But as it stands, the teleological argument is a fallacy. You know it's a fallacy. This has been explained to you. And you continue to run the same presentations over and over and over again by argument, by fallacy. And this is where I kind of think that the disconnect happens, because you have been explaining these things. Jackson did answer your questions. I mean, is it like something we fully understand? No. But do you agree that before we even understood DNA, when somebody said, how are these genetics, well, we haven't used the word genetics, how are these traits passed on, right? Why is it that the offspring looks similar to the parents? How is it they have instincts that are supposedly even like a baby? Baby knows how to suckle, right? One of the first things we ever do
All right,
is
Steve,
suckle.
let's get some answers from that to those questions from Ahmed.
Okay, let me 20 seconds to wrap it up. Do you agree that 200 years ago we would have been? We have no idea how this happens, but now, oh look, we do have genetics. We do have an explanation of why things are passed on from generation to generation, and it's not any kind of particulate as suggested. It was some kind of blending process. So we do understand things now that we didn't before. And your argument for 2,000 years would have been this, again, applicable for all this time by the same reasoning. Oh, we don't know, therefore God, which is a God of the gaps argument too.
Okay, should I go now, Dapper?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So I have 2 comments here. So this is not an argument from design altogether. I'm not asking how the bird gets a sensor in its eyes or in its head to understand, to pick up magnetic signals, or how an eye picks up visual signals, or how a fish picks up chemical signals. This is not the issue at all. The issue is you're a human, or you're a bee, or you're a fish, or you're a bird, and you are somewhere, and you understand that you need to leave and go somewhere else, and then go back, and you do it in a specific time. And if you have talked about design, then it is time to consider the design example I've given for the beaver, because this beaver has a blueprint for a dam, a sophisticated blueprint for a dam. And we know that the sperm and the egg of the beaver, to the best of our knowledge, does not encode blueprints for anything. And the bee has the blueprint for its hexagons. And the bird has a blueprint for its, small nest. It's a very sophisticated one. And it has things to do with humidity and temperature and taking care of the eggs, etc. So almost all animals that build things, ants, they do these crazily sophisticated ant houses under the ground. Each one of those creatures, they have those blueprints, hatch some ants in the middle of nowhere, and they will build their ant house. The same for the birds, the same for the bees, the same for the beavers. And these are stunning things.
All right,
and we go to civil engineering. So this is not the argument. I'm not arguing how the animal.
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think maybe I can try to boil this down. Tell me if anyone thinks that I'm not getting this right. I think Ahmed's argument is we do not have a good explanatory mechanism for the origin and evolution of instinctual behavior. Therefore, God created instincts, or therefore something had to create extrinsic to life had to create instincts, and that can reasonably be inferred to be God. Is that a reasonable summation of your argument?
Well, I'm not sure if the examples that I have mentioned can be boiled down into instincts, because I do not think that building a dam can be said to be an instinct. Building a dam means that you have a blueprint. The same for the nest and for the hexagons and for the ant houses. These are blueprints.
Can we look at the link that I posted? Can we please look at the link that I posted? When you say there's no blueprint for this, that is wrong.
No, I'm saying, where did the blueprints come from? There is definitely a blueprint that. So where is it coming? This is the question.
Okay, so here's an example. So these mice. So there are 2 mice which are sister to each other, and they are Paramiscus polynotus and Paramiscus maniculatus. And so the polynotus, which is the old. There's the old field mice and the deer mice.
Do you want to share your screen? Do you want to share your screen or something?
Sure.
Maybe you'd like to share. Yeah.
That works. That's fine. I'll just do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So this is. Can you guys see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So here is a study which looked at how the burrows that these mice make, the old field mice and the deer mice, are directly influenced by their genetics. So the old field mice builds complex burrows with long entrance and escape tunnels. Meanwhile, the deer mouse builds very simple burrows. But when you cross them, they form the derived burrows, indicating that the complex burrow. Sorry, they build the complex burrows, which indicates that these are derived and dominant to the simple burrows. So there is obviously a genetic component here to the burrow building.
And I would imagine
Right.
those burrows are based upon ecology, correct?
I probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean,
probably.
it's evidence that if one species here is making this type and another species is making this type, and you put them together, then there's going to be another type of burrow that's somehow going to be a mixture of the two, a new type, correct? Is that what is?
Well, this is saying that like these are dominant or recessive, basically in terms of alleles. So the allele for the complex burrow is dominant to the simple burrow, and so this is obviously showing that it's like simple mutations for the same or for these alleles within the same gene, which are responsible.
So it's a dominant one. That's always going to be the case that it's going to be built in the more complex and the simple.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And so,
Yeah. Well,
so
again,
this is
these are evidence of genetics, right? I mean,
Right.
all these things boil down to some genetics. It's not some kind of like designer said, "Hey, I want it to be this way." Your argument is prescriptive. It is saying that somebody has made this happen because somebody with an intentionality, some agent wanted it this way, which has never been established, right? Obviously, you don't need intentionality when it comes to genetics. It's just putting things together, and the resultant is going to be a biological creature that has similarities to its progenitors, and that's how it works, correct? I mean, we understand. But let me ask you a quick question. If this was like 200 years ago, and you see a bunch of ants, right? And an ant, because we get them every summer, right? An ant goes across somewhere. All of a sudden, you see 2 ants, you see 3 ants, and they all go the same path. And you say, how do they take the same navigation? How do they go the exact same path? We have no idea. We have no idea that it was chemical related, right? We know it's chemical related now. We know those chemical transfers and they leave a chemical residue. Mm-hmm. We understand this now because science has learned these things. But using your argumentation, this is why it's a fallacy. This is why it's called a fallacy of design and sophistry. Is you would have said back then, we don't know how this works. It must be some kind of designer that told these ants where to go get the food. It fails in that capacity. In the same reason it fails for capacity now. We keep on learning new things. And even though we do not fully understand some of these processes, we do understand other processes that at one time, using your arguments, would have been incorrect. This is why it's considered to be a fallacy. And I know you've been explaining this to me many times, or you've been explaining this many times. Your argument is a fallacy, no whether you accept that or not. And this is why I don't think a lot of people will, take that anything that you've been arguing very seriously, because you cannot argue by fallacy. Once you have a fallacy, you're done as far as your argumentation. And these are long-standing fallacies. Like you've studied Islam. You know how far that goes. What is it? The 10th century?
7th century for Islam.
7th century? It's a long time that the Arabs have tried to promote argument and theological arguments, and they failed. They've always recognized it to be sophistry.
All right, let's get a response from Ahmed because we went on about that for a little bit.
So I want to ask, I want to comment on what Jackson said and then what Steve said. So but I'd like Steve to answer something after I comment to Jackson, if you can permit me, Jackson, there. So I'll just ask the 2 questions and Steve can answer me first. So my question to you, Jackson, is, are you saying that there is an allele that has a design for a dam? This is my question. And then my question to Steve is, yeah.
Why would it be one? Why would it be one allele?
Oh, it could be, pleiotropic. Yeah,
I mean, I think it'd be very complicated.
So you're suggesting that there is a genetic code that produces a protein that tells the beaver in his cells how to build a dam. So, okay, I understand now that this is what you're suggesting. My question to you, Steve, which is, because you mentioned a specific philosophical point, as an agnostic, I'm really asking this because I want to know, how is it like? Because you have all those arguments about fence sitting, etc., and what it means and what it doesn't mean to be an atheist or an agnostic. As an agnostic, to me, you are somebody who's waiting to decide, right? Or you're not set. You have not picked a position, and at a point of time, you would love to take a position where you have evidence or a level of certainty or something.
Well, it doesn't even have to be a level of certainty. It's just a matter of if this is the case, right? If there's a God that exists, not to get into the nuances of a divine hiddenness, but I'm what's called a non-resistant non-believer. I want to know if God exists. He's more than welcome to let me know of this fact. But I don't think it makes sense to argue God exists by some kind of argumentation that requires a very specific type of knowledge and very specific types of fields. Jackson knows biology exceptionally well. Most people don't. I can't imagine a God going, look, the only way you're going to find me is if you study philosophy, study teleological arguments, and then go study biology to see if there's a correlation there. I mean, it makes no sense to me that that's how a God would go about trying to have a discovery when all he has to do is go, hey, look, I'm here.
Okay. So my question to you is this, since you have explained your position, my question to you is this. You're sitting there waiting for evidence and or a pointer. And if you are following God, then it means you've picked a religion and you accept that there is revelation and you accept that there is prophets and messengers, etc.
Depends on the
and
religion.
how we religious people accept that is by accepting that there is a process where a divine mind, a supreme being, conveys knowledge and information to someone that we call a messenger, who would then relay and put them in books. So I have given examples, just few examples that are actually few examples out of thousands upon thousands of examples from each and every animal living on the face of this planet that knows how it should live its life, has designs, has specific information, and some things that we can call instincts that help it live. And how it reaches, it must reach its mind at a point of time, but we know that it hatches, and after some time, or is born, it knows what it should do, sometimes very fast. My question to you is, if this is not evidence for you that there is an aspect of revelation and guidance in this life, what will make you, as an agnostic, accept that there is a divine being who is not acting like a deity? He is acting like a God who has will, guidance, and cares, and continues to communicate with this world every second, except that in your case, he has not given them free will, so he gives them the knowledge because they will not choose. For you, you have free will, and he gives you the knowledge in terms of a book that you can have the opportunity to reject, deny, or not accept. And if he downloads it in your mind or shows up in front of you, then he's not really giving you this choice.
Why not? Yeah, I don't understand why not giving a choice.
If you see God in front of you, this is not like you have a choice to accept that he exists or not. You're seeing him in front of you. There is no meaning for
you could say to yourself, I might be having a hallucination. I mean, obviously, you stare in disbelief, and I don't mean disbelief in the logical sense, which means to believe negation. I mean, to stare and not be able to accept what you're seeing. But I mean, it seems like your argument is that God is like every second of the time of the day is giving these animals information of how to, to do certain things. When Jackson has pointed out there's a specific protein to do certain things in a bird to find out where it's going in relationship to the magnetic field. And I'm sure we could do tests if we remove this protein or we deactivate the gene that transcribes this protein, then that bird probably wouldn't migrate very well. I think that'd be the case. If it was a God that was giving information to a bird how to migrate, then obviously it wouldn't need the protein. And if we remove the protein, God would be able to do it without the protein. And that's probably not what we would see happen, I would imagine.
Well, you are correct, Steve. There have been experiments, if I remember correctly, where they were like certain North American bovids have more difficulty migrating because the areas where they live, the forests have been like cut down, and they use the forest
and also
as
there's
visual
magnetic
cues.
storms. We know that they have issues, right?
Right. Yeah.
So there's obviously some relationship there. Now you asked me what it would take for me. I don't think God has to be so petty that he has to play these games. I don't know why it's necessary for a God to say, look, I want you to believe me because of free choice. If God is appreciative of what's vertical that has to do with reality and facts, he should just want people to know he exists, period. I mean, in fact, he interacted with people 2,000 years ago, and we're talking about the Judaic Christian God, right? Which obviously Allah would fall under. He did interact with people back then. He did show himself. He did reveal himself. He talked to people. He walked among people. Why is it any different now? I mean, this is the problem with divine hiddenness and the argument from silence. If God did these things 2,000 years ago, you can't argue, well, God doesn't want people to have free, he wants people to have free choice to come with him, come to him on their own, but they didn't. They have free choice, and he revealed himself back then. So why wouldn't he reveal himself now? I wouldn't have a problem with that. I'd be like, hey, cool. Let me ask him some questions. So I don't see your argument that, by you having free will, which I don't believe you're having the libertarian sense of the term, even on the compatible.
My argument, or let's say my question is this: as an agnostic, what kind of pointer or sign or evidence or whatever you would like to call it that will make you acknowledge that revelation and divine guidance is a fact of this world.
Well, it wouldn't be through other people. People are fallible. We know that people will not get the message right because people make mistakes. The Bible is full of mistakes. I'm the antithesis of the Bible inerrant person. You know, I don't believe the Bible is inerrant. I don't believe it's infallible. I believe it has multiple errors. And whether they're scribal errors or not, irrelevant. But there are errors that exist because man is not perfect. Anything we have that we involve ourselves with will be corrupted in some way. So if God exists and he's a perfect being, the worst way to try to explain to me that he exists through some other person who's probably more fallible than I am to some degree, when he come to me directly, right? I don't know why there's a game to be played there when, again, he has done this with other people 2,000 years ago. Does that mean, I'm just saying that all he has to do is tell me he exists. That's not a problem. I'm not going to say, go away.
I'm sure you know that as a Muslim, we do not accept that Jesus is God. Jesus is just a prophet like Moses and Abraham and Muhammad. So,
right, but people do, right? 2 billion people do, right? So you can't rely on other people to give you the correct information. Now, I'm not saying their testimony is wrong or right, but I'm just saying that they're infallible than anybody else.
Steve, that was a bit of an interruption. I want Ahmed to finish his point, and then I want to go to Jackson.
So my question to you is your answer, I will only accept God as an agnostic if he shows up in front of me, and even if that happens, I will make it probable that I was hallucinating? Is this your answer?
That's not what I said.
Okay, so that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think I was hallucinating.
You take to accept revelation. If not this, then what else? This is just give me a simple answer. God reveals himself, and he's able to tell me things that I have no way of ever knowing. I mean, if God exists and he answered questions about the universe that I couldn't get from anybody else, I'd be content with that, and I wouldn't care what anybody else thought. I'd be like, yeah, look, I've already walked with God, I've talked with God, I know God exists. I wouldn't care what anybody else thought at that point. And that's probably, what some theists do because they think they have talked with God, and I get that. But again, I'm very much into personal experience.
Okay, hold on. Ahmed. We're going to Jackson because Jackson was politely waiting.
I'm sorry.
I would like to read the abstract of a paper, if I may. The paper is it's titled Anadromy, Podamadromy, and Residency in Brown Trout, Salmotrota, the Role of Genes and the Environment. This relates directly to what Ahmed was referring to. And this
That's
is
an argument for big words.
I'm sorry. You're right. My apologies. It will make sense. I promise. Do you
want to share it? Share it?
Oh,
can you put the link in or screen share it?
I was looking at it on my phone, so give me a sec because my internet is hot garbage. I'm sorry. I could never be mad at you. All right, give me 1 sec. Let me pull it up because I was looking at it on my phone. In the meantime, somebody should test their juggling skills, I guess. I don't know.
Steve, you're up. Juggle.
What am I trying to do here?
Juggle.
Juggle.
That's terrible.
I'm not a juggler.
Steve, I thought you had juggling. I thought Dapper had ice cream.
I got no skills in that.
I'm
not coordinated. I am not a coordinated kind of guy. You do not want me to do anything that requires coordination.
Disappointing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was not prepared. Okay.
We'll believe you. Just tell us if you
hold on.
Just read it. Just read it. It's
okay.
going to be
by faith.
All right. Okay. So the paper says, and I actually almost got into it. Oh, there it is. Haha. I found it, guys.
Yay!
Yay!
Jackson
go me.
Reads papers.
Jackson reads. No one wants to listen to me read papers. Wait, that's what I already do.
We've been waiting for you to do this for a while now. We do want to hear you do it.
All right, we're there, folks. We got it.
Okay,
right.
we got it.
All right. Can we see it?
In a second, we will. There we go.
Fish biology, yes.
Journal of Fish Biology. All right. I'm not going to read that whole thing. Screw that. All right. We'll get a little ways into it. All right. Brown trout, Salmotrota, is endemic to Europe, Western Asia, and Northwestern Africa. It is a prominent member of freshwater and coastal marine faunas. The species shows two resident river resident, lake resident, and 3 main facultative migratory life histories, which are downstream to upstream within a river system: fluvial, adfluvial, potamodromous, to and from a lake, lacustrine, adfluvial. Okay, so river residency versus migration is a balance between enhanced feeding and thus growth advantages of migration to a particular habitat versus the cost of potentially greater mortality and energy expenditure. Fluvial, adfluvial migration usually has less feeding improvement, but less mortality risk than lacustrine, adfluvial, or alacustrine and anadromous, but the latter vary among catchments as to which is favored. Indirect evidence suggests that around 50% of the variability in estrata migration versus residency among individuals within a population is due to genetic variance. This dichotomous decision can be best explained by the threshold trait model of quantitative genetics. Thus, an individual's physiologic condition, e.g. energy status, as regulated by environmental factors, genes, and non-genetic parental effects, acts as the cue. Suffice it to say, it's genes and the environment again, and I'll put the link here on the side.
Yeah, and there's probably a complex overlay between the relationships of various interactions of genes. I mean, obviously, genes don't operate generally on their own. They operate in complexes.
Right. Exactly.
You know, one affects quite a number of other genes, and then also you have epigenetic factors, which which is a relatively newer field of science. I mean, epigenetics hasn't really been known for very long.
It's only like
as far as our understanding of that, a methylation of the DNA and how that carries over from to offspring. Because generally we're speaking, hey, look, phenotypes don't carry over, but with methylations, you can have certain things carry over for a couple of generations.
Right.
But these things, Ahmed, are again. Science learns and science understands these things. You can't start off with an argument we know has been fallacious in the past. It'll never make it non-fallacious, period. No matter how many times you use your presentation, it'll never be non-fallacious. It is fallacious, I'm going to say this, by design, to be fallacious, because it is sophistry. Okay? I mean, does that make sense? You can't get anywhere positive from having bad foundations, and I certainly, as an agnostic, not going to believe in a God because somebody has sophistry. It's not a reason why to believe in God. It's a very bad reason to believe in God or believe God doesn't exist.
Let's get Ahmed's take on that.
Yeah, so I will comment on the reading of the two. I don't remember the word. What
the trout?
Brown trout.
Brown trout.
Yeah, and now the fish. Okay.
Yeah.
So to me, it doesn't answer anything. So we have fish that knows about migration, and another fish that knows about migration. And when you mate them, they still migrate, but they do things that are more relevant to their new mated structure. So
that's what natural selection is. Yes.
That literally is natural selection.
That's very nice. It doesn't explain how do they do migration in the first place. Where is the knowledge, and how does it go to the offspring?
That was explicitly answered.
You're suggesting that knowledge is genetic. And knowledge is not genetic, and because you cannot produce evidence to the arrival of the knowledge. What you are producing is that when the shape of the animal due to mating changes, then also its use to this knowledge changes to make it fit to its new shape. So we're still not putting any grip on where the information comes from.
Well, we understand the mechanisms, though.
So I think there's what you're not understanding is you've kind of got part of it. You've got part of it, okay? So you are getting that, like, this, first you're using knowledge in kind of a strange way, but I'll just take it for now. When we say, like, the knowledge of how to migrate, right? Whatever, instinct, whatever. Okay, but as the paper just said, it's environmental cues and the variability in whether or not they migrate is determined both by the environment and their genetics. So
exactly,
this is why they migrate. They migrate because they have food, or because they, if they happen to breed in an area where more of their offspring survive, right? Then those who go there are more likely to survive on average. They eat the food, they're more likely to survive on average, and that's what evolution is.
I mean,
that's
do
what
you
natural
think
selection is.
Do you think God's continually giving these? Hang on. Do you think God's continually giving these species and these animals information?
So since you mentioned that, so I mentioned a couple of things in my presentation, but we have this ayah, we have this verse in the Quran. It says in Arabic, and then I'm going to translate it. وأوحى ربك إلى النحل أن اتخذي من الجبال بيوتا ومن الشجر ومما يعرشون. What it means is, your Lord has revealed. The word أوحى is not easy to translate to English. It's like revealed. It's like secretly communicated or covertly communicates. Okay?
Sure.
So that being the translation. So your Lord has revealed to the bees to take, to make housing in the mountains, in the trees, and in what humans construct. It's also somehow interesting that bees would just accept those boxes that we put them in. But there are different verses in the Quran that says that this kind of knowledge for building things, for constructing things, it is explicitly mentioned that this kind of knowledge is not going to be materialistically explained where it arrives. Yes, you can. No, you didn't, because yes, you
remember
can
the first paper.
Yes, you can have one kind. Yes, you can have one kind of bee that builds a specific structure of hexagon, and mate it with another kind of bee, maybe, that builds a little different design, and the hybrid one will make a design that's in between or different from both. But that does not explain, again, the existence of the knowledge of building things that have hexagonal shapes.
Well, it does. That's
Okay,
natural selection
look,
in action.
look,
It explains
the first paper that we talked, or well, not with the bird protein, the one about the mice, the old field mice and the deer mice. Building the burrows is explicitly a genetic factor.
I was trying to remember the animal. It was mice. Yeah. Okay.
That's fine. That's fine.
You have one way that one species that builds it this way, another one builds it this way. They get together. You get something different. I mean, it's selection.
Explicitly genetic. This is not. It's not that they learned it. It's that there are mutations.
Information beamed in their little brains.
Yes, it's in their genes. It's in their cells that.
All right.
When they need.
We got it. It's genetic. Let's let Ahmed go ahead.
You are saying that through the mating, the offspring will build a different housing than both. You are not explaining how this or that subspecies in the first place have a concept of a house in the first place.
They already build these burrows.
And that one has design. And when you mate them and the new offspring has different body features, it builds a new housing that is consistent with how its phenotype. Because I will tell you, my response will be that God, who enabled that these species can interbreed, will not, forsake the new mated or hybrid subspecies and not give it it will still give it its guidance, because the first verse or the first ayah that I said, it says on the as if Moses is speaking, he answered Pharaoh, our Lord is the one who has given everything its creation and guided. And this includes hybrid creatures. It's not exclude. It says everything. So this would be my answer. The question is, where is the guidance coming from? Okay. Obviously, there is variability in guidance, like there is variability of shapes in animals. So I don't think this is an answer, really.
All right. So do you think it's more likely that an animal that burrows in the ground is more likely to survive?
I don't know. Maybe they can survive in many different ways, but if it is a
way, but it increases their odds of survivability, which again, naturally,
it helps them with animals and it helps them with many things. Yeah.
Well, hang on. Natural selection is really just a fancy term for a process of differential reproduction. It's a matter of who survives, who doesn't survive. It's all really natural selection is. Matter of fact, it's not even that great of a theory because it doesn't really, in my opinion, really describe much. But it works. We know natural selection happens, but all it is what lives and what dies. What passes on as genes and what doesn't. And don't you think that an animal that has a more complicated burrow from predators that will pass that that genetically on to their offspring are going to be more likely to survive? And let me kind of wrap this up, so I know we got to do a Q&A. Have you ever heard of Diane Dodd? I think I pronounced her last name. She did an experiment with Drosophila, which are fruit flies.
The pseudobscura experiment.
Yeah, and so the experiment was very simple. She had isolated two groups of Drosophila as what's called allopatric speciation, something separated by some kind of geological or separation of a barrier. And she fed one group mostly maltose and the other one starch as their primary diet. After many generations, and they put them back together, there was what's called sexual selection, where the ones that were dining on maltose, reproduced with other ones. Ones with starch reproduced with the ones that had a dietary thing of starch. We know these things occur that way because of genetics. It's not some being that says to these fruit flies, hey, look, this group was dining on starch, therefore you're going to have sexual selection with starch. We know there's a naturalistic explanation of why these things occur. We don't need a deity to go, hey, look, fruit flies. These ones that pass, dined on this, therefore, mate with these.
Steve, we're going to wrap this up and get a quick response from Ahmed, then we're going to dive into the Q&A.
Yeah, so my quick response there is like this. It occurs to me that you are not responding to the matter of the arrival of the information. You are responding to, okay, we have observations that this kind of knowledge, those designs will change if the animals mate. It explains nothing to me. But also on your comments, Steve, that are really striking, because I had other conversations before, and sometimes I reach the same point. And I'm surprised because you're an agnostic, you're not a strong atheist, that at the end you will resort that I will accept God if God reveals himself to me and gives me evidence of things that humans do not know, so that I'm sure he is really God. And I'm sure, okay, he shows him. So your conclusion there is I will accept God if God gives me no other way except to accept him by direct revelation to me.
All right,
which is,
it might not be what you said, but we got to wrap it up and go into Q&A.
Yeah.
First, I'm going to read the super chats that have come in, and we had two from Second Best, Bob, and apparently they were a bit overlapping, so I'm going to read the longer one from him. But first, we had for $1.99 US from Vandalia 1998. Is this a triple threat or 2-on-1 match? I think it's primarily 2-on-1, but I'm hoping that it's reasonably fair with the timing and allowing everyone to speak their mind. I don't know. You guys might disagree with me. Maybe I'm doing a horrible job. What do you guys think?
I think you did fine.
No,
all right.
I'm fine. I'm fine.
You're fine.
I really happy listening for.
Ahmed's a big boy. He can handle it.
All right.
Yeah.
And we had two super chats from Second Best Bob, each for £5, but I'm going to read the second one because it contains everything the first one had. He says, who knows about God? I'm only here for Steve McRae's, quote, new hair with a smiley face with heart emojis.
Oh,
yes.
Call me.
So our first question
It's been a long year. I'm lonely. What do you want? Call me.
Our first question is from Otangelo's vlog, and it is for Jackson. How did nature select the 20 amino acids used in life amongst about 500 occurring naturally on the prebiotic Earth, including how did nature sort out the left-handed? I think it means left-handed.
I have no idea. I don't study biochemistry. Next
You're
question.
talking about left-handed or right-handed amino acids?
Yes.
I mean, you can sort them. There's like experiments with I don't remember what crystal it was, but you could sort right versus left-handed amino acids on that. But I'm not a biochemist. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, biology could have gone the other way. Why not? But we do know that there is a difference of how they operate. We do know that left-handed things don't operate necessarily the same way as right-handed. We understood that very well when it was when they gave pregnant women formaldehyde, wasn't it? I believe the drug was called.
Thalidomide.
Thalidomide. Yeah, I'm not a chemist.
It wasn't formaldehyde. Yeah. Everyone knows
formaldehyde.
That.
Formaldehyde. But I mean, why is there more matter than antimatter? I mean, there might be things that have some kind of non-symmetry that exists. Why something that has more preferential to one than the other?
No.
All right. So our next question, and by the way, please, if you don't want a super chat, do try to tag me in the questions. It makes it much easier for me to find them. I might catch questions that don't have tagged in them, but I also might not, because if they're not tagged, I just have to scan for question marks, basically, and it's not very reliable. So our next question comes from Nestlig20, who says, to explain for the Q&A, to explain the hexagon structure of beehives, bees initially construct the hives as circular pods, but the structure becomes hexagons in the same way mud cracks tend to form. Hexagons, or a better example, is when you add soap bubbles together to form hexagons. It's intermolecular forces that result in a hexagon shape, an example of order emerging from the bottom up, which happens a lot in nature. That's not a mystery whatsoever. So I think that's primarily a comment countering the claim that Ahmed was making that beehives are of divine origin because, according to Nestle 20, the shape primarily arises as a result of not intentionality from the bees, but simply physics.
We see that with the top of Saturn as well, by the way. But I mean, a lot of the stuff has to do with the lowest possible energy
Let's let
states.
Ahmed see what he wants to respond, and then if anyone has any quick follow-ups to his, we can do a quick follow-up there.
Yeah, well, those kinds of explanations are not explanations, because the bee is not doing this unintentionally. It is building the hexagon. It puts stuff in there and then covers this and seals it off. It knows what it's doing.
No, he just said it's not building a hexagon.
The hexagon is a result of the physics that has to do with the physics of the material.
He's building a circle.
Is that okay? So then I will ask you, why did it decide to secrete this material inside the house, not spit it off at any tree? And why is it doing this tediously? And then why this forms? It puts there things, whatever, eggs or food or whatever, and then seals it off. And then we find these things in that way for every bee. And why does a bird do its nest in this way, etc., etc., etc. I am not. My argument has never been, okay, let's think how. What is the exact chemical composition of the? I'm asking why, and for what reason, and based on what knowledge, and where is the blueprint that each animal is following to create the structure it lives in, the form of its, the way it migrates, the reason is it does things.
Let's let Jackson or Steve get a quick
bacteria. This is the response. I don't want to disagree.
Well, they're not following any blueprint. Again, these are instincts. These are things that we know exist because of natural genetics. I don't know how many times people answer the same questions. It's like if you look at Saturn and you look at the top of it, there's a hexagon pattern to be had there, and you're using your type of process. Be like, oh look, this obviously is an alien type structure because it's a hexagonal shape we don't see that pattern naturally in wind formation. So therefore, ergo design. This is why you cannot use this type of inference. The design inference, the teleological design inference, does not work. It is nothing that can be relied upon. And again, as Jackson did point out, these are instinctual behaviors that are learned behaviors over many, many generations that if they don't get it, they die. If they do get it, they survive. It's not that complicated. It honestly isn't. I mean, I don't know why there needs to be an over explanation for it. You say that Jackson hasn't explained it, but he clearly has in a very basic, understandable way that anybody could understand. You do something good, you tend to live more. You don't do this. You build a burrow that's deep, you're going to survive. You build something on top where predators can get you, you probably won't. It's all
right. I think we've had enough follow up on that, and so we actually do have a bit of a follow up from the person who asked the question or made the comment in the first place, and this is from Nestle 20 again, who says that simply going on and saying, okay, well, maybe the bee thing is explained, but what about this and that is in fact moving the goalpost. And Ahmed, you've been accused of moving the goalpost. What do you think about that?
Because I said the bee thing is not explained, just like any other is not explained. I didn't say the bee is explained.
Okay, and we have
because it saves its things and its honey and its its offspring in a specific way. It knows what it's doing. This is not a coincidence of chemistry and physics.
Okay, and we have another follow-up from Otangela's vlog for Jackson.
You're going to ask me something else related to biochem? Because I'm going to tell him I don't know.
We'll have to just read it and find out. He says, you don't need to be a biochemist to recognize that nature has no way to select functional building blocks for distant functions.
Of course it does.
As I already said. Yeah, but also as I already said, I remember, I think it's calcite crystals where they, where you have left and right will actually order themselves into particular.
Well, have you ever seen rainbow bismuth?
Rainbow bismuth? I've seen it. Yeah, tell me about it.
Rainbow bismuth looks like it's an art. I mean, it looks like it's something created by an intelligent agent that created something that's very artful. As a matter of fact, if you look at it, some bismuth, rainbow bismuth, you would go, hey, look, this is clearly somebody's art, but it's not. It's natural crystallization.
That's kind of, I guess that's, would it be fair to say the cubic pyrite? But it's the pyrite will form these perfect little cubes. It's it looks like,
Yeah, many types of crystal formation.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it's just,
crystal
it's just
formation, because it
the
forms
repeating
under very
pattern.
specific conditions for the physics, right? Because again,
Right.
things want to go down to the lowest energy level with
Right.
efficiency. And we see this in biology a lot too, with when I don't think Ahmed realizes that these complexities that happen, these iterations that occur, where you get more and more things that look like design, it's just basically principles of ratcheting, where you have a low degree of entropy in an area, and that you have sunlight coming in, right? That give you a amount of energy to do something to reach it to the next ratchet, the next level. So you have this ratcheting, it's called in biology, of complexity, because you have an influx of energy coming into the system where you have a localized decrease of entropy, but you have an overall increase of entropy to the universe, which again satisfies these.
Right, I think we're going to have to move on to our
thermodynamics.
next question, which is from Snake Was Right, who super chatted for $5, and he says, Ahmed, can you acknowledge that the God of the gaps is a fallacy?
When it's used in a fallacious way, it's a fallacy. And what's the distinction? The distinction is, I personally do not invoke God to explain a phenomenon unless God said that this phenomenon is his direct intervention to provide a sign or evidence for his existence.
You're assuming the conclusion that's in question, though. You're
Yes.
saying that literally is saying, I'm only going to accept this as evidence for God because God says it's evidence for him. That's begging the question.
No, it's not begging the question.
Sure
So
it is.
just to answer your comment, I go like this. So I'm a person. Let's say I'm Steve, or I am Jackson, or I'm Dapper, or I'm Ahmed, and I'm not a Muslim already, or I'm a Muslim and I'm in doubt of the book. So there is a scientific method that you start from the book, you look at the claims of the book, and you follow them, and you either reach a contradiction or you acknowledge that it's correct. So God says, I did that with an intervention. It means that if you look there, you cannot find a direct scientific explanation that will cover it. You can make up something or make yourself satisfied in a specific way, but you will know inside that it doesn't work. So I look in the book, I see God saying, I am providing guidance, and he uses the same word like revelation, awha, which means I reveal, that he uses for prophets. And we wonder if prophets are saying the truth or not, because we doubt that there is revelation, and he's telling you, I'm giving revelation to this and that. And then if this and that, if I cannot understand how a beaver knows what a dam is, and why on earth, when I am learning electrical engineering or electronics engineering and I die, and why do my offsprings not understand how to create a printed circuit? So we know that knowledge, even if it's essential, humans need to build shelter. But if we have created concrete buildings, it doesn't go to our kids if we all die and we have some little kids around there. So we know knowledge does not go through material processes. Knowledge is learned.
That's
so
an equivocation. But that's an equivocation fallacy. Hang on. Hang on.
Let's Steve get in there.
You're doing what's called an equivocation fallacy on the term knowledge right now. There's different types of knowledge. There's explicit knowledge. There's tacit knowledge. Like, for example, tacit knowledge, I cannot pass down to my offspring how to play guitar, right? Not that I play myself, but that knowledge is something we don't pass down. But that's not knowledge that's built upon it from genetic basis. That's learned knowledge. And learned knowledge we know is not transferable. So you're playing games right now with the word knowledge because instincts are passed down. We do know that to suckle is passed down. Right? That is not learned behavior. We don't learn how to do that. We understand that instinctually because of the genetics. So you're taking that word knowledge and say, look, I acquired knowledge over my life. That acquired knowledge, which is explicit knowledge because we can write it down and give that to somebody, is not the same thing as instinctual knowledge. They're completely different things.
So civil engineering, which involves building a dam, in your opinion, is what kind of knowledge?
They're not doing civil engineering. I mean, a beaver cannot make it. Look, for your argument to even come close to be considered to be rational, you'd have to say a beaver can actually draw a blueprint, give it to somebody else, and that other person could design or build that dam from the blueprints that the beaver created. The beavers don't do that. They have no concept of that. There is no, actual physical blueprint to be had. That's why we have blueprints to begin with, right? That's why we make them. It's for other people to say, here, I designed this. I'm trying to give you an understanding of what I've designed so you can create this to specifications and tolerance levels. That's why we have blueprints. Beavers don't do that.
Unless Jackson has something to add to this, we're going to move on.
Yeah,
because we can't spend forever on each question. So Jackson, you're good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is actually something I'm going to take. Because Atangela's vlog says, I asked about amino acids, not crystals. That is true. You were given an answer about amino acids involving crystals. So there you go.
Listening skills.
Yes, that is an important thing. Let's see. We have... Oh, that wasn't a question, but second best Bob. Thank you for the super chats, and have a good night. Let's see. What else do we have? Sorry, I missed a lot of chat while I was scrolled up for super chats and whatnot. Let's see. Joe Smith asked a question. And remember, Joe, in the future, it is easier for me to find your questions if you tag me first or somewhere in the question. Can you ask Ahmed if his Aaron Ra assertion that the Quran cites expansion of the universe is actually a reference to flat Earth bubble rising as I understood it? I can ask. So, Ahmed, do you think that your assertion in the Aaron Ra discussion that the Quran cites the expansion of the universe is actually a reference to a flat Earth bubble rising, as Joe Smith understood it?
No, I don't believe in flat Earth, and there is no reference to what is explained today as flat Earth in the Quran. And the expansion of the universe, the way I understand it in 30 seconds is, it says this. I will now interpret the ayah and not make a literal translation. So it says, haven't the disbelievers seen that the earth and heavens, which I interpret as matter and space-time, have been collapsed together and we separated them, you can put between brackets, vigorously or with strength. And what this refers to is that everything was, we call this the Big Bang. And the amazing thing that I was explaining to Aaron Ra is that there is another ayah that says, وَالسَّمَاءَ خَلَقْنَاهَا بِأَيْدٍ وَإِنَّا لَمُوسِعُونَ, and the sky we have created with hands, which is a reference to power in the Quran, and we are indeed expanding. So the first one says we blew it up and it was collapsed, and the second one says we are expanding in a perpetual way. Again, this discussion is about life, but if this, for example, from physics and cosmology does not draw your attention, and the fact that he says it's guiding creatures does not draw your attention, and you would like to choose to call it God of the gaps, I cannot stop.
Where in the Quran does it say that the universe is not just expanding but accelerating at a constant velocity?
Well, actually, the universe
constant acceleration, I should say, not velocity,
is accelerating in increasing rates, which is
right, because that wasn't discovered until, I don't know, what, 30 years ago?
Yeah,
well,
until the beginning of the previous century, or even somehow into it, even the best cosmologists and physicists thought the universe was static.
Correct.
And
but we understand that it's not now, right? And we do.
Yeah.
There's overwhelming evidence that it's expanding and accelerating, correct?
And they were very disappointed when there was evidence for its expansion, and Einstein had to change his idea of his cosmological constant. So the question to you is, now the Quran is not a science book, it's a book of signs, not a book of science. So I will not, he said that it's expanding. Why didn't he say it's accelerating in an increasing rate? And why didn't he mention the rate of acceleration? Someone told me at one point, why doesn't the Quran, for example, mention the Planck constant to the 5th or 7th decimal? Guys, now again, if you want this kind of evidence, then you are putting forward something that is equivalent to what Steve has said. So give me, for example, big G or small g to the 7th decimal. You do not have then a choice to believe or disbelieve, and we're not here for this.
So you think the choice is based upon vagueness? Because again, I don't say that it has to give like a specific natural unit to a specific decimal place, which would be kind of cool, but still, it's counterintuitive, right? Humans would not have thought, because we understand explosions, right? And like Big Bang was not an explosion, but we do. This is by analogy. If something explodes, we know that it decelerates, right? After the next explosion, it doesn't get faster, right? It doesn't get more energy into the system. It loses energy as it slows down. So conceptually, even when we understood that the universe was expanding, we would not ever have thought that it should have been accelerating. That is against our understanding of science and physics at that time, because it's just not intuitive, right? So the Quran, if it would have said, hey, look, it's accelerating, doesn't even have to give a value, that would have been a little more impressive, right? It still would have been very, convincing. But the fact that remains that I think a lot of the stuff was written by humans because they understood things in their own ways, and they understood that things do expand, right? But if at the time they understood that they don't get faster when they expand, that's probably why we don't see something like that in the Quran. If it was counterintuitive, where it says, look, the universe is expanding and it's expanding at it doesn't have to get a specific rate, but it's getting faster, that would have been more interesting, I think. Don't you think?
Well, yeah, if God has told us that it is expanding at an expanding rate and etc., even more interesting. But He chooses what to say. Okay.
I mean, 300 years ago, Milky Way was the entire universe, right?
Yeah, let me tell you this. Some people do research on what they call numerology or whatever else they call it, and they would do some kinds of stunts. For example, that they would count how many times the word land is mentioned in the Quran, and how many times the word sea is mentioned or water is mentioned in the Quran, and they would show you that the ratio is 71 point something percent to 29 point something percent, which is exactly the ratio of water to land on Earth. I didn't verify it, but I don't need. So even what you say, some people really go the distance and they just keep doing things. I cannot even comment if their calculation is correct or not. But I don't go to the Quran to look at this. You know why? Because my point of view, He will give signs. He will give clear statements. So somebody who doesn't know, who is not like a grad student of evolutionary biology like Jackson, he will tell you, I'm guiding creatures, and you see the guidance, and you're stunned with it. He will tell you that I'm expanding the universe, and 1400 years later, there is, very strong evidence that it is expanding. He's tell you, I blew it up at a point of time, and then we know about the Big Bang. There are tens upon tens of examples. If we don't stop at those examples and we ask for more, it's a choice we're making. It's a choice.
I don't think
it's
an appropriate choice.
Ahmed, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What is the reason you think that I don't accept your explanation for any of these phenomena?
Because you want to live in sin.
Maybe.
Dang, you got me.
Maybe you have the hope that science will explain it in full one day, and you don't want to take a position prematurely. I don't know.
Interesting.
Or it could be that it's just not explanatory. I mean, look, the Christians say the Bible, the Muslims have the Quran. Neither one of them explain anything to me. They're non-explanatory. Even if God, unless we can talk to the person you're calling the designer, unless we can talk to God and say, why did you create this possible world of all possible worlds? Why is this extant world the one that exists? Why did you manifest this one? Then it doesn't satisfy anything as far as PSR or as an explanation, because okay, God did it. It does not explain. That's like saying, why did this machine get built? Why did the inventor make this machine? All
right, guys, we have a few more. Ask him. We have a few more questions, including one super chat that just came in. So we're going to go with that one first. This is for $5 from Patrick Dennis. Patrick says Ahmed is Hovending. His ad hoc rationalization doesn't explain blue shift in Essentia, the Andromeda galaxy. Ahmed, any comments?
Well, the Andromeda galaxy being on a collision course with our galaxy has nothing to do with the overall expansion of the universe, because even inside our galaxy, we are not getting farther from the sun. So our observation is that the universe as a whole is expanding, and you can refer to literature related to that. So this is not an argument.
Well, it also is dependent upon your distance as well.
Meteors and celestial objects still collide.
Yeah.
But the whole point is that the whole universe is expanding. By the way, Steve, because this one is more around life and biology, I would like to do another one, maybe Dapper is interested, with somebody who is a physicist, and I got put in front of him amazing revelations in scripture about physics on all its level, chemical, nuclear, cosmic, you name it. And I never stopped to be surprised and stunned that anything can be dismissed. But I'm telling you this. Back to Jackson. If, for example, you, Jackson.
Well, hold on. We can't ask more questions right now. Hold on.
Yeah, sorry. Go ahead with the questions. I'll make it an opposing statement.
Yeah. So Nestle 20 says, I also find it odd that no Muslim apologists argue that space was expanding and accelerating before this discovery was made, reinterpreting the text after the fact, hindsight.
That's ad hoc. Yeah, post hoc actually is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, post hoc analysis. Yeah.
But can it be post, and ad hoc?
Yeah, it could be.
Sorry, go ahead, Ahmed.
Post hoc or proper hoc. Oh, that's something different, actually.
This is a nice question. You know, because Steve at one point within our chat said, okay, this thing was revealed a couple of thousand years ago. Why isn't he continuing to talk to us? But he did continue to talk to us. 600 or 700 years later, from Jesus, he sends a book that he calls his final message. And he makes the attributes of that book in a way that it will continue giving evidence to people at point T naught and to people at T naught plus 1400 years. So there are statements there. For example, the one that you're asking about, that God, he says, and indeed we're expanding. It is literally this way. People 1400 years back or 1300 years back or until 100 years ago say that what he means is that the universe is wide. Because they don't learn cosmology and they do not know. Now the question you need to ask yourself is the text being written this way, even to people who will not fully understand it at that time, doesn't it draw your attention? No, why doesn't he just say and the universe is wide? Why doesn't he just say that and stop? Why does he put this kind of statement? And
people write what they understand. In a way they understand. That's all. It's just. I mean.
So it tells you something. It tells you something, Steve, about what you've said. It is not that people who don't understand who wrote it.
We've only got a few more minutes. We've only got a few more minutes, so we're going to go on to another thing. This is coming in from Smitty, who says, "How come Ahmed didn't just look up the Wikipedia articles on different animals if he wants to know why they are the way they are?" Which I think we can more generalize to say that some of the people here have, I think Jackson included, would say that you probably didn't do much of a literature search on the animals that you mentioned before putting them in your presentation. Why is that?
No, I did the research because I'm not looking at why a certain salmon, if it mates, or a certain bird or a certain beaver mates with another one, the shape of its building will be modified according to its new phenotype. This is not what I'm looking for. I actually, on my bird slide, I put like 5 or 6 ways that birds are navigating. It is not the fact that they know how to navigate. It is like you tell me, I know how to reach from Chicago to New York because I have eyes. And the evidence is, if I'm blind, I will not be able to reach there, because this is not an explanation. Having eyes has nothing to do with you understanding that you are in Chicago and you're going to New York and you know the way. If you lose the means to find the way, like the magnetic sensors in the bird's eye or some other literature that I've gone through says that they have some special brain cells that can sense the magnetic field, or maybe it's different between different birds. That one was about pigeons. Anyway, it's not about how they sense. It is about how they use their sensory equipment to fulfill objectives that they have, and those objectives are based on information and on knowledge and on purpose.
All right, we're gonna move on to what is probably going to end up being the last question, because we are quickly running out of the allotted time for the Q&A, and then we can do some quick wrap-up stuff. I will let everyone get in a 5-minute last words, and actually I think we'll probably go Steve, Jackson, Ahmed in that order. But anyway, we have our last question from an intrigued feline who says, why is it either that it has to be fully explained 100% with not even the remotest alternative, even scientific explanation, or that God is involved? It is simply explained to a great extent already, like for like 99%. Just that 1% is still a work in progress, obviously, and it always will be expanded upon.
Can you rephrase that in short?
Yeah. So an intrigued feline here is asking, basically, it seems like you are searching out areas that you feel like are not well explained in science, and then attributing them to God, and perhaps using as a method to help do this, the Quran, to find out, the Quran says that God told bees where to go, so maybe that means instinct. It can't be explained by science. So it seems like you're making a God of the Gaps argument, even if it's being guided by your interpretation of the Quran. Why is that?
Because you're fallaciously using the use of the fallacy. I had this parable that I used in somewhere else. It's like being in a house and somebody, you find the house and you live there, and then somebody comes and tell you, I built this house, it is my house. I don't want to kick you out, but I just want you to acknowledge the fact that it is my house and I will leave you live there. And then you tell him, give me evidence that this is you who have built the house. And he tells you, go to the second room to the right and take the carpet off. You will find this thing, put this thing in. It's a key. You will find the secret room down there. And you go into the room and it's not been opened for the last 1,000 years or something. And if you do not take that as evidence and you consider it God of the gaps, because, okay, I did not know about the room, hence engineer, or hence this guy is the owner. Okay, it's a choice you're making.
All right,
It's
and
a
now,
choice you're making.
all right, we're going to go to our last words. And in this, feel free to do any plugging of whatever you have coming up on your channels or social media or anything like that. And so we're going to start with Steve. And Steve, you got 5 minutes. Go ahead.
All right. Well, okay. Well, it is a God of the gaps argument, and a God of the gaps argument is always fallacious. It's never non-fallacious. One of the God of the gaps argument is basically saying is that, look, we don't have an understanding of something at the time. There, where we fill in that gap with something else, which in this case, theists will say God. It is something that we know happens because we've seen it happen for thousands of years. We've seen people say, well, look, we don't understand this how this occurs. It must be magic. It must be demons. It must be God. Matter of fact, the God of gaps doesn't necessarily have to be God, but that's a very specific type of filling in information because we don't understand something. And, you know, I think there's another fallacy that somebody had accused Ahmed of doing, moving the goalpost, and I happen to agree with that, because when he asked for something and Jackson says, okay, well, here's an explanation for it, that explanation is not even incorporated now into the possibilities of explanations in Ahmed's paradigm, right? And so if Ahmed says, look, we don't understand how this is, but okay, next year we do. And then, oh, we don't understand this. Well, now we do. And we've done this for thousands of years, right? We continually learn things in a progressive manner, right? We build things upon prior knowledge, precept upon precept. As a matter of fact, in the military, anybody's been in the military, you have, Dapper, we have a very similar military background. We know things are built upon precept by precept, right? You start down here and you learn and you learn and you learn and you learn. And sometimes they may say, look, you may not understand this right away. We call it PFM, if you remember that acronym. I'm not going to say it. I don't want to get demonetized, but people may figure out what PFM stands for. But it's because we didn't understand at the time. They said, look, you don't have to know how this works. Consider it pure effing magic. But eventually you'll learn how it is, right? And so what the God of the gaps argument does is say, look, we don't understand this, and we're going to just term that as God. So, you know, Ahmed, your entire presentation is sophistry. I mean, this is literally understand the definition of sophistry: to promote argumentation by fallacious means. Sometimes sophistry can be good. Sophistry is not necessarily a negative thing. People use sophistry to try to explain arguments to other people by using sophistic means in a very beneficial way. That's what the sophists did. It's not necessarily negative. But however, when it's due to misunderstandings, when it's due to promotion of actual things that have been established, long since established, as fallacies, God of the gaps, moving the goalpost, argument by design, watchmaker fallacies, these are all things that have long-standing fallacies. And I have one last question to ask Ahmed, and then I'll turn it to Jackson. You had asked me about what would change my mind, and I think I give a very honest answer. Again, I mean, it's not a be-all, end-all, but it's one thing that obviously would, right? It would convince me, right? I've got to talk to me. I'd be very convinced. I have no problem with that. Same question to you. If Jesus came down to you and said, hey, look, Ahmed, everything you learned about Islam is wrong. Prophet Muhammad was absolutely incorrect. I am the one true God. I am Jesus incarnate. I'm the Son of God, or God, depending on what you want to go with as far as Jesus. Would you then say, look, that's enough evidence to convince me that Islam is incorrect and become Christian?
You go ahead and answer.
Okay, so actually Muslims believe that Jesus will have a second coming. So
that wasn't my question, though.
Yeah, so we believe that when he comes back, he will declare clearly that he is a prophet.
Okay, but Ahmed, remember before you said when a direct question is asked, you have a direct answer. The direct question is, if Jesus came to you and said, hey, all you thought you knew about Islam is wrong, I am in fact God, you should worship me, would that be enough for you to leave Islam and become Christian? That's a yes or no.
Yeah, if I know this is Jesus, I will accept it.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Fair answer. I'll accept that.
Jackson, if you would like to go ahead, you have up to 5 minutes to do your closing. And remember, this is also your opportunity to plug anything that you got coming up. So go ahead.
Wait, do I get 5 minutes when I start talking?
Oh, can I
Or do
plug
have
something
5
real quick?
minutes?
It's already going, man. It's already going.
Can I do my quick plug?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Go to
quick plug.
Go to
Like,
Steve's channel.
Yeah, go to my channel tomorrow. Tomorrow I've got a guy named Holando coming on at 7 o'clock Pacific time. He was showing me that the WASP argument, the weak atheist special pleading argument, is incorrect. He's been working on this. He said he's dedicated a lot of hours to dismantling my argument.
Ooh.
And I'm like, yes! So tomorrow, my channel, Steve McRae on YouTube, Holando's going to come on and he's going to show me all the errors I made in my weak atheist
What time is that?
argument. 7 o'clock Pacific, which, by the way, if that is incorrect, then probably I would imagine the atheist semantic collapse argument might be as well.
All right.
But by the way, I'm publishing a paper on that, hopefully.
Well, if you want to go see Steve McRae get absolutely destroyed on his own
Love
channel,
that. Destroyed.
7 p.m. Pacific, it's the first link channel. I linked both his Steve McRae channel and Great Debate channel. So check those out. They're linked in the descriptions. And Jackson, here you go. You got 5 minutes starting now.
Wait, is that the proposition that like weak atheism is simply like the lack of belief rather than they're coming on to debate that with? Oh, Christ.
Just do your
All
thing.
right.
Just do your thing, man.
Okay. I know how that's going to go. So I have a channel also. It's just my name, Jackson Wheat. Go check that out. I have a book with RJ Downer. The rocks were there. I'm very curious to know what research Ahmed did in preparation for this, because he mentioned he read some papers. I'd like to know, because it seemed pretty clear that that there are a lot of explanations, and not 100% necessarily, but there are lots of explanations for these things. Like the bee honeycombs are not actually hexagon, like they're circular. That seems like that'd be something that would have been found out, or like looking at the structure of it, or the fact that genetics is correlated with particular organisms' burrows and things like that. These are all things that it seems are pretty surface level, and are not necessarily evidence for God. So there you go, Dapper.
That's all you got? All right. Well, in that case, Ahmed, you have up to 5 minutes to give your any plugs that you want for like anything coming up on your channel or social media, and also any final last words that you want. And then what we're going to do is we're going to shut this down, and then in a little bit we're going to come back for an after show, and I will be giving all these gentlemen a link, and there will be a few other people who get links, and then eventually we might open it up to a wider range of panel members. So, Ahmed, here you go. Your time starts now.
All right, so here goes. So this was my argument for God from life, not from biology. What I'm arguing here is that biology does not explain life, that life is more than biology. Biology explains the materialistic aspect of life and how it affects how would somebody or some creature with those bodily features, and how if those bodily features change, that might affect its life. But it does not explain, for example, I would learn mathematics and calculus, and my children will not know calculus. We are the most sophisticated mind on this planet, but we don't pass over information that we learn through materialistic processes. In the Quran, he says, Allah says that he has taught. And then he says, I'm guiding the animals. Specific ones, but he gives a general statement about that. He's guiding. And then he gives us that it does draw my attention very much that humans, the most sophisticated minds on the planet, know nothing compared to animals. We don't even know what's good for us to eat. We learn. And this is not coincidental, because knowing the things that the animals know would have definitely been good for our survival. We're here for a different purpose. We are here to start from scratch so that Jackson and Steve and Ahmed and Dapper have the opportunity. They don't need to unlearn what their ancestors learned and then learn. They're starting from scratch. They will be affected by their environment and their parents, but they will have a choice, probably around adolescence, to take their own choice. I have been a kid who was like a geek, and I looked into things, very sophisticated topics in physics and biology and cosmology and etc. when I was like starting 9 years old. And at 13 years old, I thought, well, I'm raised Muslim, but I need to figure it out. And I had to take a choice. And every one of us takes this choice somewhere in his teens. And my message to everybody who's listening to this, if for every sign you will dismiss and say it's God of the gaps, then what remains is that you will wait for God to come to you. And news to you, he clearly said in his last message that he's not going to do that. He told you he's not going to do that. So you're waiting for something that's not going to happen. And the one who was accused by saying that I am God, who is Jesus Christ, one of the mightiest prophets of God, has a second coming where he will say, I'm innocent. I didn't see it. Didn't say it. So guys, if you're waiting for God to come and tell you and show you himself just straight in the face, it's not going to happen. You have to make your mind. And this is why we are here. And we signed a contract before coming here that we accept this challenge. And we will stand in judgment. It's as simple as that. This is my closing statement. And I hope that those who are listening to this understand that science can bring you really close to God, but you just need to not dismiss what you see. Thank you. I have to thank Steve and Jackson and Dapper for entertaining the discussion, and I take no offense, but I'm really thankful for your arguments and everything.
Well, you're welcome. At least for me. All right. Well, I think that there is the end of the statement from Ahmed. So I will give you guys a little bit of what's coming up here. So originally, I wasn't sure if I was going to premiere a video today because normally Thursday is a premiere video or premiere day, but I figured between this and then doing an after show, I'm not going to premiere a video. So the video that was going to premiere today is either going to premiere next week or the week after, depending on how many videos I get done in the following couple days. I do have a stream coming up on Saturday, as well as after that, I'm going to be on Vandalia 1998's channel, assuming that that's going ahead, which I think it is right now. Then Tuesday, I don't know what's happening because there's a lot of stuff that might be happening, including possibly a Kent Hovind debate that I might do an after show for. I might also do a 5,000 subscribers / birthday stream that day. I don't know. It's very much up in the air. So don't ask me too much about it. We're trying to figure out what's going on right now.
Where the hell did you get 5,000 subs from?
From the internet.
Damn, you've been growing, man.
Yeah, I'm at 5.5 now.
Yeah, I remember you just like little.
Yeah, I know. I was just looking at my 100 subscriber special that you were on.
Yeah.
And I joked with
that's been a while.
I joked with Nikki that I had to spend $1 per subscriber on the bottle that I drank, and that is no longer a viable option. But it was that day.
I forgot about mentioning upcoming work. Can I take 5 seconds?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'm having this discussion. I would like to call it that with Dr. Joshua Swamidas of Washington University.
Okay.
This coming Saturday, not this one, I mean the 19th, which is about why he used to not accept evolution and why he accepts it now and why I do not accept it. So I think this is fun. It's my second interview with him. So you'll find the upcoming stream on my channel for those who would like to watch that.
All right. Well, I do like Dr. Swamidas generally, so that does sound like an interesting conversation.
Dapper, if you get 1 million subs, we'll get you a ball of the McAllen, okay?
Oh, well, all right. Deal. All right.
And the link to my channel in the description for those who would like. Yeah. Yes,
the channel, everyone's channel here is linked in the description as well as the after show. So I would encourage you to all go subscribe to everyone here and also click on that after show link because I'm going to be sending the link to these guys very shortly. And that's it for now. I will see all of you guys hopefully in just a little bit on the after show. It'll probably be...
I'll join for a few.
Yeah, it'll probably start at like 4:30 Pacific, which is what, 7:30 Eastern? Yeah, math. There's too many time zones, man. Just coordinating this was a pain.
Go to flat Earth, man. You don't have to worry about time zones.
Right? It's always daytime. All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to end the stream now, and I will hopefully see everybody later.
Thank you. Bye.